Don't reply yet. There's one sentence that can stop this argument from turning into another long, exhausting night, and almost nobody uses it. You're in the kitchen on a Sunday night, rinsing a plate you don't even care about, and your phone lights up on the counter. It's a message you've been waiting for, but the second you read it, your body tightens like you just got hit with a small wave. Not because it's cruel. Not even because it's dramatic. It's because it carries that familiar tone, the one that tells you this could turn into the same argument you've had 10 times already. You can feel the impulse rise, explain yourself, correct them, defend your intent, bring receipts, and win the point. Here's the slightly uncomfortable truth. Most of your recurring fights aren't about the topic you think you're fighting about. They're about the moment you feel unseen, and how fast you try to force understanding through pressure. You want the other person to get it now, to hear you now, to validate you now. And when that doesn't happen immediately, you push harder. Or you shut down. Either way, the relationship pays for that urgency. So I want to give you something you can use today, not later, not after you finish the episode. Here's one exact sentence. Say it word for word. Help me understand what this feels like for you. Then stop talking. Don't add a second sentence. Don't tack on a defense. Don't soften it with, because what I meant was, just ask it cleanly, and give it 3 full seconds of silence. Here's what changes in the next 10 minutes when you do that. First, you interrupt the courtroom energy. The conversation stops being about who's right and starts as being about what's real. Second, you create a tiny pocket of safety, because you're signaling, I'm not here to win, I'm here to understand. And third, your nervous system gets a chance to settle, because you're no longer sprinting toward a verdict. You're opening a door instead of throwing a punch. That one line won't solve everything, but it often prevents the spiral that ruins the rest of your night. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. Now let's name the pain plainly. You're tired of the same fights, the same topics, and the same tension. You're tired of feeling like you have to choose between speaking up and keeping the peace. You're tired of the post-argument hangover, the quiet, the coldness, the awkward we're fine that isn't fine. And if you're honest, you're also tired of yourself in those moments, the version of you that talks faster, gets sharper, reaches for old examples, or goes silent in a way that punishes. This isn't just emotional. It has real costs. It makes work harder the next day because you're distracted. It drains your focus because your mind keeps replaying the scene. It affects your sleep because your body stays on alert. And over time, it teaches the relationship a dangerous lesson: conflict equals threat. Here's the line that matters: this is costing you closeness. Not in one big dramatic moment, but in small withdrawals, less warmth, less honesty, less trust that you can disagree and still feel safe with each other. What I'm going to help you do today is simple and concrete. You'll learn how to identify the real issue underneath the repeating argument so you stop fighting shadows. You'll learn how to use questions and listen to lower the temperature instead of raising it. And you'll learn how to stay calm and steady even when the other person isn't, so you don't get dragged into the same loop. If you want more tools like this that make your relationships feel calmer and your life feel lighter, subscribing helps you build that rhythm over time. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. First, you'll learn a short script that stops the instinct to defend and turns conflict into clarity. Next, you'll practice a listening shift that makes people soften without you begging for it. Then, you'll learn how to respond when you're triggered, without exploding and without disappearing. Finally, you'll see how all of this works in a real situation that usually ends in tension, so you can actually use it the next time your phone lights up and your chest tightens. And later, I'm going to bring you into a specific moment. Late at night, the argument starts over something small, and the old reaction is right there at the edge. So you can see exactly how to steer it toward understanding without surrendering your self-respect. Before you understand anything else, memorize this sentence and keep it close. I might be wrong, but this is how I'm experiencing it. Say it slowly, exactly like that. This isn't a trick and it's not a way to weaken your position. It's a way to keep the conversation from turning into a power struggle before it even starts. Here's why this works in plain terms. Most arguments escalate because both people are trying to protect their sense of being right at the same time. The moment you speak in absolutes, you always, you never, that's not what happened, the other person's nervous system hears danger. They stop listening and start defending. When you lead with uncertainty instead, you take the edge off. You're not surrendering your experience, you're framing it as an experience, not a verdict. That small shift lowers resistance and keeps the conversation in the realm of understanding rather than accusation. Picture a common North American moment. You're sitting on the couch after a long workday. Bills are open on the coffee table. Someone says, "You're being careless with money again." Your chest tightens immediately. The usual response rushes in: explain your reasoning, justify the purchase, point out their spending, raise your voice just enough to show you're serious. That's the reflex. But instead, you pause and say, "I might be wrong, but this is how I'm experiencing it." When I hear that, I feel like my effort isn't being seen. Notice what changed. You didn't debate the budget. You didn't attack their character. You named your internal reality. That alone often slows the exchange enough to prevent it from exploding. The tiny action for today is specific and measurable. The next time tension shows up, by text, in person, or on a call, use that sentence once and only once. Don't repeat it. Don't decorate it. After you say it, wait. Count to 3 in your head. If the silence feels uncomfortable, that's normal. That pause is doing work for you. It's giving the other person a chance to respond rather than react. Now slow this down for a brief practice. Wherever you are, unclench your jaw and drop your shoulders. Take one quiet breath in through your nose and let it out through your mouth a little longer than you breathed in. As you exhale, imagine stepping half a pace back from the argument, not leaving it, just creating space around it. Then silently rehearse the sentence once. You're training your body as much as your mind here. Calm doesn't come from better logic, it comes from less threat. This connects directly to something I teased earlier, the way fights repeat themselves. The reason they loop is that both people keep presenting conclusions instead of experiences. Conclusions invite rebuttal. Experiences invite curiosity. When you lead with "I might be wrong," you're signaling that you're open, not armed. That doesn't guarantee the other person will meet you there, but it dramatically increases the odds that the conversation stays human. One more thing matters here. This sentence is not meant to be followed by a speech. If you say, "I might be wrong, but this is how I'm experiencing it," and then talk for 2 minutes, you undo the effect. The power is in its restraint. You offer your experience, then you create space. That space is where understanding has a chance to show up. As you practice this, you may notice an urge to rush in and fix, clarify, or soften the moment. Let that urge pass. You're not responsible for controlling the outcome. You're responsible for how you show up. And when you show up grounded instead of defensive, you stop feeding the pattern that keeps arguments alive. In a moment, we're going to look at a common mistake people make even after they start listening better, a subtle habit that reignites conflict without them realizing it. Keep this sentence in mind as we move forward, because it's one of the simplest ways to stay steady when the temperature starts to rise. The moment usually starts small. You're driving together, traffic is slow, and someone sighs a little louder than necessary. Or you're standing in the kitchen, and a comment comes out sharper than it needed to. You feel it immediately, that internal jolt that says, "Here we go again." Your mind starts racing ahead, already preparing the defense, and already predicting how this ends. And without realizing it, you lean forward emotionally, ready to correct, explain, or push back. The mistake most people make at this moment isn't yelling or being cruel. It's something quieter. You start listening in order to respond, not in order to understand. Even when you stay calm on the surface, your attention is already halfway into your reply. The other person feels that. They may not be able to name it, but they sense you're waiting for your turn, not actually with them. That's often when they repeat themselves, get louder, or escalate, not because they want to fight, but because they don't feel received. Here's the correction, and it's simple enough to miss. When someone is upset, your first job is not to clarify the facts. It's to reflect the feeling. Before you explain anything, say this: what I'm hearing is that this feels frustrating for you. Then stop. No fixing. No defending. Just that. Why this works is straightforward. When people feel emotionally mirrored, their nervous system settles. They don't need to push as hard to be understood, because they already are, at least on the feeling level. Reflection doesn't mean agreement. It means recognition. You're saying, I see the internal weather you're in, even if I don't yet agree with your conclusion. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Let's ground this in a familiar scenario. Your partner says, you never really listened to me. The reflex is immediate. List the times you did listen, explain your intentions, point out how unfair never is. But instead, you pause and say, it sounds like you're feeling ignored, and that hurts. Notice what didn't happen. You didn't argue with the word never. You didn't correct the timeline. You didn't defend your character. You reflected the emotion. Very often, the response you get back is softer. Yeah, it just feels like that sometimes. The volume drops because the pressure to prove the feeling eases. Here's your tiny action for today. In your next tense conversation, reflect one feeling before you offer one explanation. Just one. You don't need to be perfect. Even a slightly awkward reflection is better than a perfectly phrased defense delivered too soon. If you're unsure what the feeling is, you can say, it sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed. Am I getting that right? That question alone can change the direction of the exchange. Now pause with me for a brief pattern interrupt. Take one slow breath in through your nose. As you breathe out, imagine setting your reply down on a table in front of you instead of holding it in your chest. It's still there. You haven't lost it. You're just not gripping it. That physical image helps your body tolerate the space it takes to listen fully. There's something important to understand here. Reflection often feels passive to people who value clarity and efficiency. It can feel like you're wasting time, like you're letting something inaccurate stand. But in practice, reflection saves time because it prevents escalation. 10 seconds of emotional recognition can save you an hour-long argument later. This also connects back to the earlier idea of uncertainty. When you reflect instead of rebut, you're implicitly saying, I don't have the full picture yet. That posture keeps you flexible. And flexibility is what allows conversations to bend instead of break under pressure. In the next section, we're going to stress test all of this. We'll look at what happens when emotions are high, stakes are real, and you don't have the luxury of a calm environment. Keep this correction in mind, because under pressure, reflection is often the difference between a fight that spirals and one that quietly diffuses. There's a belief that quietly sabotages a lot of progress right here, and it sounds reasonable enough to slip past your guard. The belief is this: if the other person is emotional, you need to match their intensity to be taken seriously. People think calm means weak, and restraint means you're letting something slide. Under pressure, that belief convinces you to raise your voice, sharpen your words, or rush your point, because you're afraid calm will cost you respect. Here's the correction, and the stakes are real. Matching intensity doesn't create understanding, it creates symmetry. Two activated nervous systems don't resolve anything, they collide. If you want influence in a heated moment, you need contrast, not equality. Calm isn't passive. Calm is leverage. The cost of forgetting this is predictable. Voices rise, meaning collapses, and afterward both people remember the feeling more than the facts. The instructions are clear and usable. When emotions spike, slow the conversation down before you add content. Use this sentence exactly as it is. Let's slow this down for a second. I want to get this right. Then pause. You're not asking permission. You're setting a pace. That one line changes the tempo of the exchange, which is often the real problem. Here's why it works. Speed is what turns discomfort into threat. When things move too fast, your brain switches into protection mode. Slowing down sends a signal of safety without dismissing the issue. You're telling the other person, this matters enough to handle carefully. That alone reduces urgency, which reduces aggression. Picture a pressure-heavy North American moment. It's late. You're tired. A conversation about responsibilities turns into accusations. Someone says, "You don't pull your weight." You feel heat rise immediately. The old reaction shows up: defend yourself, list your contributions, point out theirs. Instead, you hear yourself say, "Let's slow this down for a second, I want to get this right." There's a brief pause. It might feel awkward. But that pause interrupts the momentum that would have carried you straight into another blow-up. From there, you can reflect what you're hearing or share your experience without competing for airtime. Now add a slow practice moment right here. Notice where your body holds tension when conflict ramps up, often the jaw, the chest, or the hands. Gently relax that spot. Take one breath in, and as you exhale, imagine the conversation moving at half speed. Not stopping. Just slowing. This isn't about controlling the other person. It's about regulating yourself so you don't become another source of fuel. This matters most when the stakes are high: money, parenting, time, respect. In those moments, urgency feels justified. You tell yourself, this is important, we can't slow down. But importance is exactly why slowing down matters. When something is fragile, you don't rush it. You handle it carefully. Relationships work the same way. There's another subtle benefit here. When you slow the pace, you create room to choose your response instead of defaulting to habit. Habit is what keeps old arguments alive. Choice is what breaks the loop. That choice might be to ask a clarifying question, to reflect a feeling, or to name your experience without blame. But none of those options are available when the conversation is sprinting. You may notice resistance to this. Part of you might think, if I slow down, they'll think they won. That's the myth talking. Winning a moment often costs you the relationship. Slowing down isn't surrender, it's strategy. It keeps you aligned with your values instead of your impulses. As we move forward, I'm going to bring all of this together in a single situation, the kind that usually ends with tension lingering into the night. You'll see how slowing the pace, reflecting emotion, and leading with uncertainty work together when the old reaction is right there, ready to take over. It's late in the evening, and you're finally sitting down after a long day. The house is quieter than usual, but not calm. There's a tension hanging in the air that hasn't been named yet. It starts with something small, maybe a comment about a bill that didn't get paid on time, or a reminder about something that was supposed to be done earlier in the week. Nothing explosive. Just enough to wake up the old pattern. You feel it in your body before you think it through. Your chest tightens. Your mind jumps ahead. You already know where this usually goes: raised voices, clipped sentences, that moment where you feel misunderstood and start preparing your defense. The old reaction is right there, ready to take the wheel. For a second, you almost let it. Then you catch it. Instead of responding immediately, you take half a breath. Not a dramatic pause, just enough to slow the pace inside you. You hear yourself say, "I might be wrong, but this is how I'm experiencing it." The room doesn't magically soften, but it doesn't harden either. You continue, briefly, naming what's happening for you without assigning blame. You stop talking before the urge to explain takes over. The other person responds, still tense. They repeat their point, maybe a little sharper than you'd like. You feel the pull to correct details, to point out what they're missing. This is where things usually tip. But instead, you reflect. It sounds like this feels really frustrating for you, like you're carrying more than you expected. You're not agreeing with every word. You're acknowledging the feeling underneath it. There's a pause. Not a comfortable one, but a real one. Their shoulders drop just a little. They don't have to push as hard now. They say something like, "Yeah, it just feels like I'm alone with this sometimes." That sentence wouldn't have come out in the old version of this conversation. It only shows up because the pressure has eased. The tension hasn't disappeared, but it's no longer escalating. You notice your jaw is clenched, so you consciously relax it. You slow your breathing, letting your exhale be longer than your inhale. The conversation feels like it's moving at a manageable pace instead of racing downhill. Then the moment comes where emotions spike again. A word lands wrong. You feel the heat rise. This is usually where voices lift. Instead, you say, "Let's slow this down for a second, I want to get this right." You don't say it to shut them up. You say it to protect the connection. The pace shifts. There's room to think again. From there, you ask one simple question, not to trap them, not to fix everything, but to understand. You listen without rehearsing your reply. When you speak, you stay anchored in your experience instead of issuing conclusions. The conversation stays grounded, even when it's uncomfortable. You notice something important as this unfolds. You're still holding your boundaries. You're not agreeing to things you don't accept. You're not erasing yourself to keep the peace. But you're also not feeding the fire. The old spiral never fully takes over. Eventually, the conversation winds down. There's no dramatic resolution. No perfect agreement. But the energy in the room is different. You're not walking away with your heart pounding or your mind racing. The night doesn't feel ruined. You can actually relax. Maybe you sleep better. Maybe you don't replay every sentence in your head. What changed wasn't the topic. It was how you showed up when the pressure hit. You slowed the pace. You named your experience without turning it into a verdict. You reflected emotion before defending facts. You stayed intentional instead of reactive. That's the difference between an argument that damages and a conversation that, even if it's hard, keeps the relationship intact. And once you experience that difference, even once, it becomes easier to choose it again the next time tension shows up. At the center of everything you've just practiced is one quiet distinction that changes how relationships feel from the inside. Reacting scatters you. It pulls you into speed, stories, and old habits. Responding gathers you. It keeps you intentional, steady, and present, even when the moment is uncomfortable. When you react, your nervous system takes over and your words follow. When you respond, you choose your pace, your language, and the version of yourself you bring into the room. First, we interrupted the reflex to defend by leading with uncertainty, giving your experience without turning it into a verdict. Then we shifted the focus from facts to feelings, reflecting emotion before explaining anything, so the other person could feel received instead of opposed. Next, we slowed the pace under pressure, using calm as leverage rather than matching intensity and letting the moment spiral. Finally, you saw how all of that comes together in a real situation, where the old reaction nearly takes over but doesn't, and the outcome is a calmer night instead of lingering tension. None of this required winning, fixing, or surrendering yourself. It required staying grounded long enough to choose your response. Now let's turn this into action you can actually take today, not someday. The first thing to do is choose one upcoming interaction, one text thread, one conversation, one moment that usually carries tension, and decide in advance that you will use the uncertainty sentence once, exactly once, and then pause for 3 seconds before saying anything else. Measure it simply. Did you say the sentence and create the pause, yes or no? That's it. The second thing to do today is practice reflection without correction. The next time someone is upset with you, reflect one feeling you hear before you offer any explanation. Even if it feels awkward, even if you're not sure you're getting it exactly right, reflect first and wait for their response. You'll know you did it if the volume drops or the conversation slows, even slightly. The third thing to do today is protect the pace when emotions rise. When you feel your body speed up, your jaw tightening, your chest heating, your words lining up too fast, use the slow down sentence and take one longer exhale before continuing. You're not trying to control the outcome. You're choosing not to add fuel. If the conversation still stays hard, that's okay. The win is that you stayed intentional. If this lesson landed for you, the most natural next step is to explore how to hold boundaries without guilt or escalation, because many arguments persist not from misunderstanding but from unclear limits. A follow-up episode you might want to watch is something like How to Set Boundaries Without Starting a Fight, where the same calm, deliberate approach helps you say no without hardening or apologizing for existing. As you move forward, remember this: understanding doesn't require agreement, calm doesn't mean weakness, and slowing down is not the same as giving up. Every time you choose to respond instead of react, you teach your relationships a new rhythm. That rhythm builds safety, and safety is what allows honesty, closeness, and respect to return over time. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be a little more deliberate than you were before. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.